Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Solopreneur Grind Podcast. Very happy to be joined by Cathy from WP Cathy, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Very excited to jump in, Cathy. Before we do so, can you just give a quick introduction, tell everybody a little bit more about who you are and what you're working on these days?
Sure. I'm Cathy Mitchell. Been running a small agency solopreneur thing since 2008, mainly focused on WordPress and helping the audience kind of naturally became content creators. So it's been mostly content creators with a few universities. It goes by word of mouth, so it kind of spreads organically that way. But yeah, it's been a few years.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about how you initially got into that business? And then I'm also curious, I do use WordPress, but is WordPress still as, shall we say, dominant as it's been over the last couple decades, I guess, by now?
I have my doubts, but it is still the most used software, and up to 60, I saw some stats, it's over 60% of CMSs when people are looking for a CMS are still using WordPress. I got into it when WordPress was much more difficult to use. So back in the day, you had to know how to build a database on your WordPress, on your web hosting account. And so a lot of people didn't know how to do that. And it's not coding, but it required knowing how to log into your web hosting and knowing the difference between WordPress.com or Blogspot and the downloaded open source WordPress. So we started installing. I was helping a friend who was helping friends install WordPress, and we would charge them $20, and we would install WordPress and a theme and plugins and just help them get started. And then that was Heather, and she was a single mom. And it's kind of a funny story. She started seeing somebody and then didn't have time to work her full-time job and help friends with WordPress. And so she kind of let me do my thing with it. And I was fascinated by business. This was my third attempt at a different business. First two failed utterly. And so I just started helping people and trying to meet demand, and some interesting, hiccups along the way as we increased prices, learned how to find an audience, all of that stuff. But I inherited probably 10 or 15 clients from Heather to start out. So that was it was very exciting when we had a client come to us who wasn't a friend.
Right. So the key
Right.
takeaway is to find people who are about to enter relationships and start working with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Make sure they get really busy
Exactly.
or have a baby.
I think one thing maybe I'll just clarify for those who don't know is WordPress is software that allows you to basically build and manage your own websites. I realize there might be some who don't even know that.
Right.
And I'd imagine now that with all the drag and drops and, the Wixes and Squarespaces of the world, so a lot of the no code website building tools that maybe WordPress is a little bit less dominant. Cathy, how did you even get into it to begin with? Like at that point in time, how did you know how to use WordPress?
Oh, that's a good question. I kind of skipped that part. So in 2007, how many babies did I have at that point? I had one baby, and I was bored to tears. I had left my job as an independent insurance adjuster, looking after people, going to visit burned out houses and all these crises and writing checks, and it felt really good. And I decided I was going to be a stay-at-home mom, and it was going to be brilliant and sunshine and gingham and homemade cookies. And it turns out baking and gardening just weren't really cutting it for me. So all the power to those moms that want to stay at home with babies. I just can't. Even with 3, I was bored to tears. So on some level, like intellectually, it's very difficult to stay at home. So my husband suggested, well, why don't you blog? I heard about Ree Drummond, who at the time, now she has like a home and garden show and all of that. But at the beginning, she was just a blogger. And he'd heard about this housewife who turned blogger and was making all this money. So why don't you try that? So I started blogging, and then the community was really interesting. I decided I didn't want like a normal theme. I wanted to change this or that on my website. And so I had to figure out how to do that because I wanted to look different from other people. And then that kind of led me down this rabbit hole of learning a little bit of coding, getting involved in the community, meeting Heather, and then helping. When I learned something, I would help other people do it, and was helping Heather. And then it turned out after a year, I made 8 cents blogging, like 0.8 cents blogging. And so, but I was very good at changing things online. And then I discovered other people couldn't just figure it out as quickly as I had. And so it was valuable. And that kind of got me started with Heather and at $20 a pop. And then, yeah, there's a whole story.
Well,
How much do you want to know?
I mean, it's interesting because so many of the, this is going to be, I don't even know, episode 135 or something like that. And it's just incredible how many of the stories start with, I was looking for something more, and so I started doing stuff, and then things ended up working out. Not necessarily overnight, but by taking action and putting yourself out there and meeting the right people. Not often the way that you
Yes.
had originally planned it, right? But you put the wheels in
Right.
motion and then they kind of go from there. Can you talk, Cathy, a bit about this was, I think you said '08 when you started getting into this. How, like, now, so now we're 17 years later, which is kind of crazy to think about. Are you
Yeah.
still doing a lot of the same stuff? Is it like WordPress website management? Like, how has the business evolved? And maybe like, how has the market evolved? And my last question, if I can just pile some more on here, is like, would you recommend this industry to someone who's maybe interested in websites? Like, is this a good time to be working in such an industry?
Hmm. Well, when I started, there was a lot bigger market and a lot smaller competition. That's key.
Mhm.
I'm really afraid for people that decide to start a business because they're good at something and don't consider the market or the competition, especially when you pay a lot of money and it's basically a mindset course. Like you can have the best mindset in the world, but if the numbers don't line up, you're not going to succeed. Like even if you really, really want to. And and that worries me a lot when I see people spending a lot of money because course creators have hyped them up that this is going to work. And of course, that's their job. They're salespeople. But yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into running a successful business. And like I said, this is the third time I had tried, and the first two failed miserably. So the question was, would I recommend this?
Yeah, and also how have things changed in that
Oh,
span as well?
so things change all the time, especially if you're going to be in the tech industry, as you know. So probably the first big thing to change was that I had to raise my prices, and they rose by 250%. So I started charging $40 an hour. So that was just 100%, but that was per hour. And so I lost about 20% of the audience at that point, but I started treating it more like a business. And I read a book, The E-Myth. Do you know who writes that one? But it taught me the
Pull it
difference
up.
between Gerber.
I think Gerber, yeah. I mean, it's maybe one of the most
It's old.
recommended books for solopreneurs that I've kind of
Is
heard.
it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can understand why. It taught me the difference between being a designer and then being a business. And so you have to be intentional about it. And it was really practical. And then I knew I needed to grow the audience. So then I read books, Duct Tape Marketing and The Storybook Guy. So I'm sorry. I'm not very good with the authors, but there was key books that helped me along the way. That was one, because tech, like to talk about how tech has changed would take forever. It's changed every few years. Now we're going through another one with AI. And now this is the biggest challenge in my career so far, is because my audience is mostly content creators who have switched to influencers. But that whole niche, I'm having to figure out how I can serve them. But it was a boutique service originally. And so we started coding and doing special things for this niche. Word of mouth spread. We used like the referral engine and were remarkable, as Seth Godin says in The Purple Cow. We became remarkable because I would recognize people's birthdays. I would send them a little onesie when they had a baby. And that, when you do things in real life, when you're an online entrepreneur, like people talk about it 10 years later. And so I didn't think this was actually relevant at the time. Like I wrote it off. It was just being nice. It wasn't like a marketing thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sent out a survey, which I highly recommend, to say, why did people choose me? And it turned out I got stupid feedback. It didn't help at all. It was all about how I was nice. And I'm like, this doesn't say anything about like my competition, how I compare. It doesn't say anything about my prices, like my service, nothing. It was just, I was nice. And 6 months or a year later, I just figured I'd lean into it. And so it's become my thing, I guess. Like I just try to be more reliable than other developers. I'm more like I will tell them to save money if they can. I won't tell them to buy my services because I want them to succeed long term, which I think is what anybody doing this has to do. Like you have to think long term and you have to serve your clients to the best of your ability. And that is memorable. Like if you're not just out there for $1 and you're actually helping people, people appreciate that and they'll talk. And when a friend says, hey, I'm looking for something, they will recommend you.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes we kind of overthink and overanalyze when, as you're saying, and one of our recent guests, Matthew Stafford, said the same thing about sales. He said, I was just an honest, nice person. And
Yeah.
it happened to work out pretty well. The other theme I'm noticing here, Cathy, is when you hit up maybe a potential roadblock or difficulty, you just started reading a bunch of books and kind of taught yourself the way, right? Like
Yeah.
there is so much value that people get from like a $15, $20, $30 book that
So much.
those who aren't reading and educating themselves, as you kind of alluded to, be careful with some of those overhyped courses. But if you go to the classic books that are still being recommended decades later, there's a reason, right? There's a reason why they are. So
I'm
don't
kind of
sleep on
encouraged to
those.
hear they're still the popular ones. So I would
Yeah,
have
I
assumed
mean,
they're newer, better.
the classics stand the test of time, right? Like a lot of, and this is what we were just saying, a lot of this stuff is not necessarily rocket science, right? The principles of business actually haven't changed all that much. The tools, the
Yes.
tactics, the flashy this and that
Yeah.
changes a lot. And the people kind of chasing the next dopamine hit might. But
Yes.
the core principles of selling and business have
Yep.
mostly remained the same over time, right? So, which is a
Yep.
good sign
And
if
if
you're
you're
willing to
not
put in the work.
prepared to do that, if you're not prepared to do the work, the likelihood is it's not going to work.
Exactly. My next question, Cathy, is more on the like productivity side. You've been working as a solopreneur for a long time. How do you kind of structure your day or how do you have productive as possible days given the solopreneur situation?
So for me, I've struggled with the mental health issue my whole adult life. And so it was really important for me to be consistent and show up for my customers. And so I got I've always had a subcontractor kind of on call. And there were years where I paid her and not myself because I just needed to be professional. I needed to show up, but I also knew that I would take days off or at least hours off. And so I've always been available to her by phone, but I tried to, at least in the last like 5 or 6 years, I've tried to really be a company and not just me, my name, because I need people to see the professionalism undergirding everything that we do, even if I'm off for a while. So for me, it wasn't a great move financially, but it is what has helped me remain stable and professional And it's interesting because in 2012, I was divorced. And so it could no longer be my hobby, my side income. It had to actually work. And so that was very scary. I think we were charging about $75 an hour at that point. And because we were coding, I was coding, and then I had this one contractor helping me. And sometimes I've added an assistant where I can't handle the amount of admin work. And I've always hired overseas, which I know is controversial, but it gives them a good income and it helps me to be able to provide a service. So it's been something that I am okay with, that I looked into, and I really appreciate being able to hire overseas. Where was I going with that? Oh, my productivity.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. It's hard, and it's hard to maintain boundaries. So I don't work weekends. I haven't worked weekends in a long time. Now, that's not to say I'm not thinking about it or researching stuff, but I don't. Like, the office is closed on Saturday and Sunday. That was a really good boundary because after the divorce, that's what I was going to say. I decided that I had to make it work, full-time income now. I was solely responsible for the 3 kids, or get a job, of course. So I set a budget to the max of my credit cards and a 3-month timeline to give it a go, to see if I could make it work. And it took about 4.5 months to try and build it up to a full-time income. But I highly recommend doing that because that was a cutoff time where it was, my sink or swim. And so I wasn't just going to mortgage the house. I wasn't going to go on forever and make us destitute. I had like a cutoff time, and that worked for me. I can't imagine sinking everything that you have into something and then it not working. So that's how we handle it.
Yeah, I've definitely heard some stuff related to how kind of like burning the boats, so to speak, can be a great motivator, right? And what you did was kind of a middle ground. You had a burn the boat strategy, but it wasn't if this doesn't work, we're out on the streets. It's like, if this doesn't work, I'll go get a job, but I'm not going to risk, given your personal situation. Now, maybe there's some listeners out there who are 21 living in their parents' houses,
right?
And that's okay.
Go for it.
Go for it. Take bigger risks. Maybe you have a longer runway, or your go for broke date is a little bit further. But
3 months is pretty short.
Yeah, 3 months is tight. But it probably, like what you hear a lot of it, that like the cliche, like, shoot for the stars and you'll land on the moon. In this case, okay, you didn't get it in 3 months, but you made it in 4.5, which is still pretty fast for business growth, right? And look where you are now, because of it, which is awesome. Cathy, can you talk about the evolution into working more with content creators? Like, how did that kind of come to be? And what's it like? Are content creators, like, do you mean bloggers, or do you mean these are social media influencers who don't have time to manage their website, or both?
So they were bloggers because influencers weren't a thing when I started. Instagram was hardly a thing. Facebook was all of the rage. And for a few years, people made a good living off of Facebook because it would send most of their traffic. It was pre-SEO. And then Facebook decided they were no longer going to promote. It was a pay to play. So they weren't just going to promote your business page for free. And that tanked a lot of businesses. And then people became scared of not owning their property or their content, their audience, basically. So then they focused more on websites. And then they didn't want Blogspot. They wanted their own website that was under their control. So that helped boost my business. And mostly the audience growth strategies I've used have been being remarkable and a referral engine, being very specific and particular about the referrals and the testimonials. But yeah, so the bloggers they've been trying to find their own path through the tech changes. They've been trying to keep making an income through all of these changes. So SEO became popular. So then I focused on helping them with SEO. And then social media became, and I tried to spread. It's a lesson on spreading yourself too thin. I'm a WordPress girl. I'm a website person. There's no way I could keep up with all of the social media stuff. It was hard enough to do websites and SEO. So now AI is in the picture. And so it's a balancing act of trying to help my clients succeed and also drawing the line about how our expertise will expand. Like there's only so far that we can go and still maintain that expert level. So we're staying mostly on the website side, which is bringing me to this year that I'm going to have to probably double. I haven't done the numbers yet. I'm going to have to double my client base because a couple of hundred of boutique clients aren't going to cut it because websites should be a lot cheaper than they were. So now I'm thinking instead of like $160, $200 maintenance plan to cover like the website thing every month, people are only wanting to spend under $50, especially if it's not your blogging platform, the one making you all the money, because their website is now more or less a catalog of their content or a media kit. But most influencers are only going to make money if they have really successful social media campaigns. And so I'm trying to keep an eye on what's happening with the influencer market, the blogging market, ads placement, SEO, like all the things that drive traffic to websites, and trying to serve my clients. But this is the first time in 17 years I've had to cut my prices.
What do you think about, one thing I've been thinking about along those lines is how AI is going to affect SEO, because so many of these blogs for so long have, and a lot of them have made a lot of money off of SEO,
Yeah.
right? Just showing up high in Google. What are you starting to see happen now that more people are maybe using Google's AI generated results at the top? Or they're not even going to Google, they're going to ChatGPT, they're going to Claude, they're going to Grok, right? What are you seeing, or what do you think is going to happen with SEO?
That happened around 2021 to 2022. SEO dropped by at least 30% for most websites.
Wow.
And so it's really interesting now. I see the ones that have like over 1 million page views a month. They are still, if they treat it like a business, they have good PR, they're gaining. Almost everyone else is losing.
Wow.
So traffic, I'm talking about. And so the ones that are still, the content creators that are still doing well are the ones that have strong partnerships with brands, have diversified into social media primarily. But yeah, it used to be 50-50 SEO and Pinterest. And so now SEO is changing. And so I'm trying to get my clients at least to diversify income, but also PR is the new SEO. If you want to be found in AI and cited by AI, it is a little bit different. SEO has been the same in principle from the beginning. If you're not gaming the system, the principles have been the same. This is the first time I've ever said, okay, it's time to change. Like you need to actually put your brand in every post. You need to say, this is, something by WP Barista or by Cathy Mitchell. My opinion and my quotes now have my name in it for AI. And PR is becoming the biggest thing.
That's super interesting. And kind of a good way to my next question, which was going to be for the content creators out there. And this is a semi-selfish question because I'm interested to know the answer too. Like, what are your maybe 2 or 3 tips to social media or, content creators out there? They're trying to grow a brand, they're trying to grow a social media following or a podcast or an email list. What would your 2 or 3 pieces of advice be to them?
Assuming you're really good at your content creation, right? That's on you to be really good at that, to not overuse AI. But I think you have to use AI or you're going to fall behind. If you're really good at that, my top tips would be always, always, always get emails. Always. It is the only way that you are going to keep in touch with your audience, that you get to keep in touch with them. Everything else gives them the option of finding you on social media. Always get an email address and bribe them for it. Give them free stuff. Whatever it takes, get an email address and develop the community. Because I think over time, content creators are going to have to, what's the word? You're going to have to come together and create like an agency of content creators to really be seen. It's kind of like what has been like advertising on TV was only for the super big corporations. And then now publishing doesn't have to be TV or newspapers. Now it's democratized between anybody. The barrier to entry has become really low. But because of that, it's so saturated that the people that are going to gain attention are the ones that are either going to come together, consolidate was the word I was looking for, with other content creators, or differentiate themselves in a really big way. There was one other one. Adapt. Change what you're doing. So for the bloggers, they can't blog on a website anymore. They have to actually be creating campaigns that create communities on social media because that's where people are. They're not in Google that much anymore. So it would be community, email, community, 100% community, because that's what's going to last long term. People actually like you and enjoy you and come to you. If they don't, like we can't just have random strangers coming for our content anymore. The competition's way too big.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. I've been a proponent of email lists for years and years. If you're not already on the Solopreneur Grind Substack, the link is always in the description. So selfish plug there. But I totally agree. Do you have any tools, Cathy? You've alluded to AI and, there's automation stuff and being careful with AI. Do you have 2 or 3 tools or AI programs or whatever it might be? It doesn't necessarily have to be AI, but what are 2 or 3 tools that you would recommend to content creators or solopreneurs as well that you like or have had good success with?
Well, to be frugal, I use almost only ChatGPT, a pro account. I have tested tons of content creation tools over the last year and a half. None of them can be unsupervised, like none of them. So I use only ChatGPT, but Gemini is also really good for checking the sources and making sure that the research, but the new one, O3 in ChatGPT, is so much better. And it shows you what it's thinking and you can stop it mid-thought and correct it and thought. It's hilarious. So I'm staying there. Content creators need to they can get AI to help with strategy. Definitely be strategic with absolutely everything you do, because that's the only way that you're going to have enough time to make a difference as a solopreneur. Is every single hour needs to be strategic in what you do. You do a lot, so I know that you follow this plan of being strategic and being very careful with your time. But for AI tools, and then I use a really good CRM that I like. So all the email addresses go in there. I know if people are opening or clicking, I know what they're interested in. There's a lot of tools that will do that. So I just found one that works for me in my website. It won't work for anybody else because it's for agencies. But I compare the 4 most popular email collection programs for websites on my blog. If you're looking at like ConvertKit, MailerLite, Flowdesk, MailChimp. So those are the 4 most popular ones for content creators. And I've compared what they're good for and their prices and kind of what you're going to pay long-term if you do grow as well, which is a key thing to consider. And then what we were talking about is the ones that are the most successful make one form of long-form content. So every week, a post, a newsletter, a video, and then repurpose. And so there's a bunch of different AI programs that will help you with that. And they are remarkably good at dividing up. Even you can plug in your video and it will find things that it thinks will be viral viral, said loosely,
Mhm.
on social media, and it will take out excerpts with your video component as well. And it'll post it even for you in some cases. So
Yeah.
use AI to do that and to do the research and the strategy. That's where I found success. I'm not an AI expert.
Well, I agree 100% because as you said, I think where a lot of people get it wrong is they think that AI is this overlord coming to do everything for them. And
Yeah.
maybe one day it might be, but for the time
Right.
being, I find that the content creation output is not that great. I do
Mm-mm.
the exact strategy you just said, which is once every week or two, I record a long form podcast like this. I use AI to edit it, and then I use
Yeah.
AI to repurpose it. And the tools now are incredible. Like, and I tried them a couple of years ago and they were okay. Now, with AI, I can take this, what will probably be a 35-ish minute podcast, throw a link in. It's going to generate, as you alluded to, potentially viral or, popular clips. And I can schedule and post them onto 6, 7, 8 platforms in about 3 clicks. It's just unbelievable. So you use
Yeah.
AI for, like you said, the I use it as well, high level strategy, repurposing, blah, blah, blah. But you still want that core content to be really good. Otherwise, all the repurposing is kind of a waste of time, right? So
Mhm.
I totally agree. Cathy, my second last question is, what would you say has been the hardest part of your solopreneur journey so far? And then what's one piece of advice that you would leave to solopreneurs out there to maybe help avoid or overcome that difficulty?
The hardest part, there's been, like that time, that time I had to sink or swim. Like it's a journey, which is kind of like life. We live and we learn. Probably the hardest part is that I don't have a group to go to work to. Like I don't have an office and people I can banter with. So it's been really important to try and find business colleagues that I can chat like this with. And I saw that you offer sort of a group or a coaching thing. And I think it's really invaluable to have somebody else that isn't you because I can think that my ideas are fantastic. And I can really get carried away in implementation because to me that's the exciting part. So once I have an idea, I want to run with it and spend the next 4 weeks on it. And then it's a huge waste of time if it wasn't going anywhere. But it's nice to have somebody either, slow down or let's think about it, or how about 1 week instead of 4 or whatever it is. Like having somebody to talk to is really important.
Yeah, and I found both on the business strategy side, as you were alluding to, and also just on like the mental health side. Like if you spend too many days in a row by yourself in a room doing work,
Yeah.
eventually, even as an introvert who's been working from home mostly for the
Oh,
last eight
oh, me too.
years, yeah, I mean, I'll go crazy after a couple. Luckily now my home includes, a spouse and a child, so that makes it a little bit easier. But yeah, going too many weeks without any communication with other, whether it be founders, business owners, whatever, I can totally relate to that. And as you
Yeah.
mentioned, we now have the Solopreneur Grind Mastermind, which is an online community of solopreneurs. We do a weekly virtual work session, a weekly check-in, a monthly mastermind. So definitely check that out. You'll see a link to the Substack in the description below to find out more information. Cathy, it's been great having you on the show. Really learned a lot of actionable advice, some of which I'll be probably thinking on and implementing myself. If anybody wants to learn more about you or get in touch, where do you recommend that they go?
They can go to my website, WP Barista, or just hit me up on LinkedIn at Cathy Mitchell.
Awesome. And we'll have links to both of those in the description, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast platform. Cathy, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been fun, Josh.